Hello and welcome to Mal Makes. Today we're going to be painting Star Hill from Super Mario RPG. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse version, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. For this piece I've done a sketch, and you can see it's kind of this little hill with these craters in it that just repeats over the entire thing. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is basically just drawing this over and over again with a chalk pastel pencil. To block this in, I'm just drawing in some of these hills here. And I'm just trying to keep them really regular with their shape, which is kind of hard to do. So I'm trying to just space them out to see exactly how many I want to fit on here, and then I might try and make a tracer that fits exactly so they're all identical. So a couple things. You may be wondering why I'm working on a black canvas. Well, for this painting, it's a very, very dark in color scene, so I decided it's easiest to start with a black canvas. If you don't have one, mine is pre-gessoed from Blick. You can either get a white one and paint it black, you could get a white one and paint it with black gesso, or you can just work on a white one, but your colors may not be as deep if you work on a white one. The other thing is I made my tracer. So I started by doing this. I freehanded the shape, trying to guess on the size. I'm sure I could have measured, that probably would have been smarter, but I guessed. And then I folded it in half to make sure that I had it symmetrical on both sides. And I put it up here and I was close. You can see it's just a little bit off down in the bottom. So what I did is I laid it on another piece of paper and cut out another piece here just to make sure it fit the exact size I wanted. And then I folded them in half and made sure they were symmetrical. But I didn't want to have this fold on the actual tracer I used, so then I traced both of them onto a separate piece of paper and got a full tracer here. So here's my full tracer, and I'm going to go ahead and erase all this chalk with a wet paper towel, and then I'm going to start tracing this shape onto my canvas. So I'm starting to lay my tracers out and fill them in. Now you might be wondering, well, why did you draw all those other ones out if you were just going to erase them? Well, I kind of wanted a certain size of how big these should be, so I had to draw a few out to make sure that they would all be about the same size and I could fit however many I wanted to on here. So that's why I did that, but I'm going to go ahead and continue laying these out, just making sure I have them just where I want them, and then just tracing them on. I'm going to start painting, and I'm going to be working from the top down to fill these in. And you may be wondering why I didn't draw any more in. Well, I do want to cover some of them up, and in order to do that, I should probably paint some of them first. Otherwise, I'm going to be trying to be real careful at the top of this one, for example. So it'll just work best if I work in layers, working top down. And for my colors, I'm using Primary Cyan. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in first for this one that sits back here. And then I have a little bit of Carbon Black I'm going to mix in to bring in some shading. To paint these hills, I'm giving them a first layer of cyan, and then I let that dry. I wait for the blue to dry, and then I'm going to go ahead and start bringing in the shadow. So I'm using a darker blue, and then I just kind of fill it in like this, with a little crescent moon shape. And then I just add my color on the inside of it, and feather it into my regular blue color. If I need to do any further blending, I just pick up this blue again on my paintbrush, and then just try and make it blend even further. After they're blended very well, I might take more of this blue and just kind of give it a second coat over on this end. For the next color, I just take a little bit of Carbon Black, and then I'm going to lay that down just on the very, very edge of each hill, and then blend it inwards. I finished these three hills, so I'm just going to keep using my tracer and work my way all the way down the canvas. Now I'm going to be leaving a little bit blank, and that's just going to be over here where there's not any hills. So I'll just kind of leave that part without a hill. I've drawn in the next two, and just like before, I'm going to go ahead and just take my cyan and give it a nice coat, let it dry, and then bring in the value. For the hill that's missing, I'm just using a bit of my dark blue to fill in that space, and you can see I kind of just marked in where these other ones were going to go with a wet paintbrush. So I'll just give this a coat just so it's filled in, and then I'm just going to feather it over here just in case I kind of messed up where my other hills are going to come in. To make sure the placement of the craters is right, in my sketchbook I traced my tracer, and then I used a different color pencil to kind of mark in where I want them to go. Then I went back to my original tracer, and I started to mark in where they're going to go, and I made little tracers for the pieces that stick out. So like this one goes here. So all I have to do is line this up, trace the center one. You can see I have little Sharpie marks for where this goes, trace that, and then I have another one for the crater that goes over here. So then I can just go ahead and mark them all in pencil and then paint them in. For these craters, I'm going to start by painting them solid blue, just to get rid of any colors that are underneath. And then I'm just going to use the same colors I've been using to add value and like depth to them, because they kind of go in right here and then like slope outwards towards the rest of the hill. So I'm just going to go ahead and do all of these. So how I'm doing this is I should start with this one over here. You can see they're kind of grouped in 3 and every hill has 3. So I'm starting with the one that's kind of flat and faces you directly. I'm going to fill it in with my regular blue first, even though it's the same thing as what's underneath it, essentially just to get it wet so my colors blend a bit better. So I'm going to fill this in, then I'm going to pick up a little bit of my dark blue, and then I'm going to start towards the inside here. And then just kind of lay this here and work my way kind of in like a rainbow arch towards this side. And that's definitely not as dark as this one, so I may grab a little bit more of my dark blue and then start back here and do the same thing until it's nice and blended in. And then I'll just kind of go right around these edges. And then I'm going to use my dark blue and kind of give it the edge out here. Once I get to about this side here, I'm just going to kind of go up towards the top and then out into my darkness so it meets it out here. And then I'm just going to fill this in. Then I might grab some pure black and then just add that into the darkest areas of this crater. Then to finish it off, I'll take my regular blue and do the top of the lip here. Then the last thing I need to do is just kind of smooth this out down here. So I have just a little bit of the dark blue, and I'm just smoothing it up towards the top lip of the crater. The second crater, I'm going to do kind of the same thing where I fill it in with blue first, all the way to the edges of the chalk just to kind of erase them. Then I'm going to take a dark blue and start to fill in kind of the edge of this crater. So I'm going to bring it down, and then around it, it's going parallel to the top of it. Bring it down on the other side, and then have it meet up. And then I'll just go ahead and kind of bring in the value where it's darker here on these edges, and it gets lighter in the middle. And I may need to darken it just a little bit, so maybe I'll just add a little bit of my dark blue here and over here. And then to smooth it out, I'll just grab some regular blue and just kind of blend them together here in the middle. As for the inside of the crater, I'm using my dark blue again, and I'm just going to kind of fill in this back wall and in the front of the top ring. And then I'll take a little carbon black and just fill in on some of the darkest spaces. And then I'll just use a little bit more blue to just kind of even things out. The third crater is the easiest. I'm just going to go ahead and fill it in blue like I've been doing. Then I'm going to grab a little bit of dark blue and bring a little bit of shading on this bottom corner. And then a bit more on this back part. So I'm just using the dark blue for now. And bring it up across the top of the crater, a little bit around the base. Maybe add a little bit more dark. Then I'm going to grab some carbon black and just make sure that these edges are super dark and that they meet up with the shadow from the hill, like down here. So I'll just kind of like fill this in. That's how I'm doing all three of those craters. Now I'm just going to go ahead and finish all of these ones. All of the blue hills are done, so it's time to start adding in the details. There's little stars that have faces on them, those are the wishes. There's these flowers that light up, so I'm going to have to draw some of those in, and then there's a big stargate. So I'm going to go ahead and use my chalk pastel pencil to draw all those in first. It's taken a bit to get right. I actually ended up printing it so I could see the lines. I drew on top of it with pencil so I could see where they go and where they line up because I was having a really hard time with it. Actually, this line is the only one that meets up all the way across. This one doesn't line up down here, so none of those line up. So that was important for me to see and kind of to see where this arch goes. So my next step is to prime everything white. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and start to draw other things in. I have the wishes and the flowers to draw in, so I'm going to use this to sort of fill in as a base, trace it, and then add the points for the stars, and then I'll use something a little bit bigger for each of the flowers. Because the star is going to have so many layers, and I want to make sure I don't lose all of these lines I have drawn in, I am working on it in pieces. So before I go to paint the flowers and the wishes, I'm just going to go ahead and paint this kind of a very, very light yellow-green. And then while that's drying, I can go back to working on those. Just like the Stargate, I'm going to go ahead and prime everything else white first, and then bring in my yellows and my greens. So I'm just going to go ahead like before and just fill these in white. It really helps with the opacity and keeping your colors nice and bright, otherwise I'll see some of that blue through and it'll look a lot more green than I want it to be, so it's a good way to keep my colors true to how I mix them. Now I could have made these wishes a bit more similar to each other so they were all identical, but I thought they had a lot more character if they were all just a little bit skewed from each other and they looked different, because, you know, in Star Hill, the ones that have smiley faces are wishes, and so you go up to it and talk to it and it tells you what a wish is, and it's someone in Super Mario RPG that has that wish. So I thought they had a little bit more character if they were a bit more haphazardly drawn as opposed to all identically perfect. The other thing I can do is go ahead and start priming more parts of the star. And I'm looking for pieces that won't be touching anything else, like I wouldn't prime these two right at the same time, because I want them to keep that line so I know where that transition is. So I'm going to continue to work on the Stargate. What I've done is I took that green I had for the main part of the Stargate, and I mixed a little bit more green and yellow into it so it was slightly darker, and then this will be my new color to go ahead and fill in just the fronts of these legs. So I noticed this green was too dark, so I stopped painting it, mixed in more white, and I like this color a lot better. So I'll paint this leg this color, and then once this is dry, just paint over it with the new color. To continue to paint the Stargate, I'm just using varying degrees of white, yellow, and green to mix up all of the different colors. And then after I finish these parts, I'll just go ahead and paint those last two white and then paint them also. So I'm going to finish up the Stargate using the same greens I've been using, and then with those same greens I'm going to paint the wishes and the flowers. It's just going to be a bit of a value scale between them to show highlights and shadows with these same greens, so it's not going to be too tough. The other thing I want to point out is I'm going to be painting both of the flowers like they're glowing as if they've been activated to open the Stargate. Now I'm going to be painting the Stargate closed because I think it looks better, and compositionally I think it looks better if both of these are glowing too. So for honesty's sake, or for the video game logic's sake, let's just say there's another one off screen somewhere that hasn't been activated yet. I finished up all of the wishes and the starflowers, and in case you were wondering, the leaves for the starflowers, I used all my same colors except they needed to be darker, so I added a little bit more blue and a little bit more black just to darken it up along the base part. Now the next thing I need to do is add a little bit of a glow around the wishes, and the starflowers get a glow down on the Star Hill. So I'm just going to use a little bit of fluid acrylic, and it's the consistency of heavy cream, so it's a bit more liquid and I can spread it easier with my paintbrush. And I'm using this in zinc white because zinc white is transparent, and I wanted to have a little bit of see-through so it looks kind of like it's actually glowing. And I'm realizing my mistake right now. I was painting over the edges of the wishes, and I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to have to grab a wet brush that's clean and just kind of scrub that part off. The Wishes glow is kind of all around them, but for the flowers, it's not around the green bursty part. It's down here along the base. So I'm just going to be using that same fluid acrylic in zinc white to bring that in too. For the keyhole, I have a plain orange, and then I also have the same color with more titanium white, just to make it a little bit lighter. And that's going to go on the face of it, so I'm going to go ahead and paint kind of the walls of the keyhole with this darker orange, and then use the lighter one for the face. While that orange is drying, I thought I'd take a moment to talk about why I've decided to paint Super Mario RPG. Now, back in 2008, I had just transferred colleges. I was in a new place, I didn't know anyone, and my boyfriend, who eventually became my husband, Steven, decided it'd be really great if he and I got on Skype together and played through the game at the same time over Skype, and he led me through all the things and showed me all the secrets. I really struggled with the Axum Rangers. I remember trying that battle a lot, and I kept dying, and I guess just at some point I got lucky and beat them, but we ended up beating the game together, so this brings back fond memories of playing that on Skype a long time ago. Since that dark orange is dried, I can take my light orange and then just go ahead and fill in the face of the keyhole. The next step is just to take a little bit more of the dark blue I had from my faraway backgrounds and then just fill this in, and it's looking like it's going to be kind of transparent, so I may have to do a couple coats on that, but that's alright. I want it to be very dark. I'm waiting on that to dry before it can get its second coat, so in the meantime I'm going to take this chalk pastel pencil and sign my name. After it's done in chalk, I'm going to go over it with a liquid black. The painting is almost done. I just want to add some faces to the wishes so they're actual wishes. But first there's some paint I wanted to try. I have this phosphorescent green paint, and it's actually glow-in-the-dark paint. So it's kind of this light green color, and I thought it would be perfect for this painting. The problem is it's not very light fast, which means that as sunlight hits it, over time it'll just glow less and less and less and less until it doesn't glow at all. But I think it would be fun for a bit at least so it could glow in the dark. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this to all the stars, the face of this star, those star flowers, maybe the little reflection down here, and then just the tips of the leaves. And then at the end of the video I'll show you how it looks in the dark. The very last thing to do is just add smiles to a couple of my stars. So I'm just going to use that same liquid black I used for my name on top of 2 stars. Now the reason I've done it in this order is because I didn't want the black of the face to glow. I kind of wanted just to be a dark abyss on the little star face. And we're done! We have Star Hill from Super Mario RPG. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a print or a poster or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of Mal Makes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.